Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Jazz Cabbage here on HRN. I'm your lightly toasted host with the most, Chala June, and if you'll indulge my nostalgia for a moment, I'd like to start this week's show by telling you the story of how I came to call myself a chef. Feel free to roll a joint as I spin the tale. Picture it. Boston, 2016. I'd been slinging banh mi's through a food truck window for the better part of a year to help pay my way through liberal arts school. What was meant to be just an easy weekend gig had reawakened a dormant, lifelong passion for cooking that I had buried under my desire to pursue a more, quote-unquote, practical career in publishing. The call to the kitchen became irresistible, and after talking myself down from the ledge of dropping out to go to culinary school, I decided to cold email every new restaurant in town, hoping that someone was in need of a prep cook who was eager to learn. Only one restaurant, a globally inspired gastropub type spot near Fenway Park, got back to me. Armed with my no task too small attitude and an extensive culinary lexicon from a childhood dedicated to the Food Network, I crushed my stage shift and was hired on the spot. To this day, though, that was the most physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding job I've ever had. When I got promoted to working the line 2 weeks in, the immensely skilled sauté chef who trained me looked me in the eye and congratulated me on working for, quote, the last great asshole chef in Boston. I worked 10 to 15 hour shifts on my feet, 5 days a week for about $11 an hour. There were many nights when I'd step off the line to go cry in the bathroom or hyperventilate in the walk-in fridge while I pretended to look for parsley. The labor was exhausting, unforgiving, and often thankless. I ended up quitting about 5 months in after the kind of panic attack that ends with an overnight stay at the Grippy Sock Hotel. And after all of that, I still wanted to cook. That was the moment that, despite my lack of a culinary degree, I leaned into calling myself a chef. It wasn't the toxic workplace, the numerous scars and burn marks, or the countless plates of steak tartare I pushed that made me a chef. It was my dedication to the craft and my commitment to never stop cooking. And even though I stopped working in restaurants several years ago, the kitchen has never stopped calling me home. In the 8 years since that first kitchen job, I've had the unbelievable privilege of profiling, dining with, and cooking alongside hundreds of brilliant, passionate, visionary chefs who have all answered that same call. And they've got the scars and stories to prove it. For this week's episode, I had the honor of sitting down with Nikki Steward, one of the most sought-out private chefs in the country, to chat about how heeding the call transformed her career from pharmacy specialist to celebrity cannabis chef. Today on Jazz Cabbage, I have the privilege of speaking with one of the most sought-out celebrity chefs and culinary entertainers in the country, the brilliant cannabis alchemist and Cincinnati native Chef Nikki Steward, founder of The High End Affair. Chef Nikki, welcome to Jazz Cabbage. It is truly such an honor to have you join me on the show.
Well, thank you so much. And shout out for that intro. Not a lot of people say that I'm from Cincinnati, but I am from the Nasty Natty.
Listen, I'm a firm believer in repping your hood. I really am.
It's always Ohio against the world.
I'm so excited to really dive into all things culinary cannabis on the show with you today, because you're someone who I've followed and admired for years now, and who I really see as a blueprint of success when it comes to the world of infused fine dining. There are a lot of exceptionally talented chefs out there who incorporate cannabis into their work, but I think I'd be hard-pressed to name anyone else who is operating at your level. Not only do you host incredible immersive dining experiences all over the country through the High End Affair, but you've also cooked for some of the biggest names in entertainment today, including Snoop Dogg, DJ Khaled, Quavo, Chappelle, Trevor Noah, and many, many more. And something that really inspires me about your story is that you've had this very non-linear path as a chef and as an entrepreneur, but your tenacity and your drive and your determination have catapulted you to the very top of the business. So before we fully kick off the conversation, I really just wanted to recognize and thank you for being such an inspiration to so many chefs and so many culinary creators, especially those whose work is marginalized because of race, gender, and our work with cannabis. So thank you again for being here with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank you for saying all those wonderful things. I definitely took the road that was less traveled to get to where I'm at, but I'm glad I took that road. It made me a little bit more aware and have much more gratitude for the position that I hold today.
And that's something that, as an outsider, definitely isn't taken for granted. And on the topic of your nonlinear path, it might surprise people to hear that before you started working professionally with cannabis and even with food, you were working in the healthcare industry and specifically in the pharmacy. What first drew you to pursue a career in pharmaceutical science, and what inspired you to leave that behind to become a chef?
Pharmaceutical science was really kind of my fail-safe in college. I went into college majoring in biology pre-med, hoping to be a neurosurgeon one day. And wow. I went to my counselor and I was like, so tell me when I'll graduate. And she's like, it's going to be a minute, residency, like all that. And she was like, well, you'll probably be like 33. I was like, 33? You know, when you're like 18, 19, you're like, I'll be old by then, you know? Right. And so I went into pharmacy as something that I was like, okay, cool. I can do this, make decent money, get out of school, still have a lot of awareness of the body and how things affect it. But then I was just like, like I was really into drugs, not socially, but the understanding of it. You know what I mean? And how the body is affected or not affected, the placebo effects, and how a lot of drugs just placate and just kind of glaze over illnesses just to make you feel better temporarily, but nothing is ever curing you. Nothing is ever actually making you feel well to the point where you have a better quality of life. You're just stabilizing yourself. And so I was really into that understanding, but then I was like, something is off here. And my creativity was not necessarily used at the capacity it is now. And at some point, I decided to leave the pharmaceutical space and just do other things. Working for CVS was not what I was thinking I was going to do for forever. No shade against CVS, but it's just, yeah, I traded the white coat for a different white coat for real. And gradually moving into food made sense for me. Something I really wanted to go to Cordon Bleu when I was 18, 17, 18. And my dad was like, we haven't even seen you cook for real. And I was like, but it's in me. It's inside of me. I know it is. And then, then I graduated high school in the 90s, late 90s, let's be clear. And being a chef was not as glamorous and sought after as it is now. Mm-hmm. So my dad was like, I really don't know what kind of money you're going to make in that. It doesn't seem like a lot. So you better go for the sure bet and go to college, get your degree, and go work. So yeah. And later on, I merged the two.
I similarly had the dad experience of being like, I want to cook, I want to open a restaurant, I want to do all these things. And he said, that's not a real career. A real career is a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer.
Exactly. To be honest with you, that is like the crux of Black excellence in a certain way. Mm-hmm. The way that we have to uphold a certain level of stature in order to feel like we're doing better than our parents, and our parents put us in a good position.
Yes.
Honestly, it low-key is childhood trauma. It caused me a lot of anxiety, but that's for another conversation.
It's definitely that Black family sort of, I call it the Huxtable effect, growing up, watching The Cosby Show, having that kind of idea of, oh, this is what a successful Black family looks like. Mm-hmm. But it can be very limiting, like you said. And
very limiting.
I'm wondering, when you were making that transition over from healthcare into the culinary world, if you experienced any sort of culture shock.
I definitely experienced culture shock. But interestingly enough, I'm often in spaces where there's very few people of color. I'm often in spaces where there's very few people that just resonate with my energy. And so it's mainly like white male-dominated spaces, to be honest with you.
Right.
Pharmacy is the same. The culinary space is the same. I'm often having to fight for positioning and for people to understand the natural disruption and what they thought was their flow. And here I come. So, and I'm switching it up a little bit and switching your ideas of what being a Black woman in these spaces look like. Mm-hmm. The element of code switching, I was taught very young. And so yes. I just know how to get in there, gain understanding, and then reassess, and then I'm good to go.
So what was your culinary education like? I know that you really traveled the world to experience and learn about different cultures. What was that journey like?
That journey was definitely me sending out emails and me asking around, calling other chefs, can I stage for you? Can I learn under you? Can I peel your potatoes? Can I, what can I do? How can I get in here? Because in the pharmaceutical space, you do learn a certain element of cooking. It sounds crazy because it's not like New Jack City cooking like drugs, but it's like a certain element of compounding drugs. Right? It's recipes. It's how are you putting things together? So that really translates to a certain level of molecular gastronomy and gastronomy within the culinary space. So that part I understood. And I understood flavors because I have some great women in my life that throw down, that really know how to cook. And so I understood the basics, but now it's technique. So I need to understand technique, restaurant operations, all of this stuff. So I did that. I traveled. I did my culinary studies in Thailand. I studied with chefs literally in different countries. And then I took courses. I actually took a course at University of Maryland where Carla Hall was one of our guest teachers.
I love Carla Hall.
I love Carla Hall. And I was like, you know what, girl, I'm about to be right underneath you somewhere in this world. So I'm going to be, so I saw the food space differently because I came into it to the back end. I came into it understanding business also first, but I also knew that I didn't want to be an executive chef for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? So I did that. And then I decided to like venture out in the world and start doing cool experiences because my creative juices were just flowing. Like I want to be able to give people more than just sitting down and eating. You know, I want to be able to give them something that is energetically pleasing, something that is connecting to their core memories, their core food memories, their core, that was a dope memory. Like that's where I lean into that level of creative.
And I've read in past interviews that you've done that cannabis has always been a part of your life and that your dad was open about his cannabis use when you were coming up.
Yeah.
But when did weed become an intentional part of your culinary practice?
Weed became an intentional part of my culinary practice probably 13, 14 years ago, where because I've been in celebrity services and providing culinary experiences, whether it be private chef services, I mainly do events. Like I'm not like in a kitchen every day cooking for a person. But there was a moment where like I was getting asked to do, hey, can you make us some edibles for the flight? And I was like, sure. Hey, can you like do this, do that? And then I also got a call from Snoop's team and was like, hey, he's launching Mary Jane. Can you do the launch party for Mary Jane? And I was like, yeah, like that was my very first cannabis culinary experience, period. Like of that scale was for Snoop. And I was like, damn, I'm starting off right here. This is where I'm starting? Shit,
Starting at
okay.
the top, truly.
I shocked myself. I literally was like, I went into it with so much anxiety because I was just like, there's a lot of math here. And like, I think what people forget is that the math part of culinary, these type of culinary experiences, when you're including cannabis and you're including courses and you're trying to keep people stable and keep people in a very like wonderful, easy space, there's a lot of math. And for people that don't do the math, you suck. Just do the math because the math is important because you don't want to be able to have someone never come back to that experience again because you ruined it for them.
Right.
When you're taking into consideration that you don't know someone's capacity for cannabis consumption, whether it's via smokables or by mouth, you're averaging the person body weight, their capacity. I mean, of course, people will overindulge and somebody will say, you know, I smoke like 10 blunts a day. Like that has no impact on when you're having infused food. So there's a lot of math between the food, between the beverages, between all of that. I'm balancing out so many different factors in your body. And I never want you to go home and you feel like you're not sturdy. So you got to be sturdy. I won't let you go.
That's so important because, I mean, we can all name someone or even ourselves who's had that one awful edibles experience where they were off into the stratosphere and they're like, oh, I'm never going to try this again. But the thing that I love about an intentional infused dining experience is that, like you said, when someone is in the kitchen with that intention, doing the math to really properly dose out courses and dose out the experience, it is this lovely gradual lift that can, you know, bring you into an experience you didn't think that you could have, as opposed to eating a really strong gummy and it all just smacks you at once. That is completely different.
Smacks you out, yeah. The experience that I strive to give is always out of love. It's always out of care. It's always out of like a core food memory for you. I want this to always be a soft landing for you. I want this to always feel like, yeah, you know, Chef Nikki took care of me for the time that I was there. It's never just to shock you. It's not a shock value because my job is to make this more commonplace in the world and make this more acceptable and make this, of course, there's cannabis in my cabinet, in my kitchen. Here's my cannabis spices and like, you know, here's all of my this and that, all of my condiments. Like it needs to be something that is included in your kitchen, just like your supplements and your liquor cabinet and like all of these things. I feel that they should be normalized, and I'm really committed to giving people soft intros into this space so they can find their way as a conduit, you know?
That's so important because it allows people to really expand how they think about cannabis, and especially cannabis in the kitchen. And I'd say there's still many, many people out there who fundamentally misunderstand what culinary cannabis is and are oblivious to the fact that infused fine dining is even a thing that exists in the world. You know, there are people who hear cannabis cuisine and they can't get past those memories of being sent into outer space or having a really grassy, dank tasting pot brownie in college. But reducing all of culinary cannabis to that one experience is similar to saying, you know, all Mexican cuisine is tacos or all Chinese cuisine is dumplings. It's reductive and it ignores history and it also ignores culture.
Agreed.
And so I'd really like to know how you would describe your personal culinary style and how you like to use cannabis and other plant medicines as ingredients in your food.
So my personal culinary style really leans into a lot of Southeast Asian, Korean, Japanese flavor profiles, and merging those two with the understanding of Southern Black American cuisine with a little bit of Caribbean, with a little bit of African, and just kind of like, I don't know, I just create this cohesiveness between the two. But I'm really amazing at broths. I'm really a broth bitch. I'm really good at it. So I do like those things are just very comforting to me, and layering those flavors. Also taking plant medicine, especially specifically cannabis, because I also do experiences with mushrooms. But taking cannabis into the understanding of like Thai flavors, the Thai have been using the stalks of cannabis plants for years in sauces. Like you can go to a little Thai restaurant, they have these beautiful like beef and noodles with the Thai, literally a cannabis sauce and like oils and things like that. But it doesn't taste like just straight terps. It's very light. But they've been using it for a long time in a lot of different ways, medicinally and in culinary spaces. And it's never been frowned upon. They don't always use the psychoactive parts. But there's a lot of like I lean into that understanding that this was something that we used to heal our bodies for forever, since the beginning of time. And so I lean into that understanding and knowing that I'm in the alignment with my ancestors and the universe, incorporating cannabis into food. And especially, it's such a great punch when you're blending them with certain Asian profiles, because you have like things like lemongrass and galangal or like coconut milk, things that like really grab the cannabis and adhere to like the fattiness and bring those flavors out. So I like to kind of move through that area real gingerly and see what I can come up with. And then utilizing cannabis as an ingredient in the kitchen there's a couple ways, because it just depends on how I have it broken down. You know what I mean? I'm not a huge fan of like butters. I'm cool with oil and things like that, but some of these things are harder to quantify and dose. I do use a lot of concentrates and nano powders and isolates and distillates and things like that. And I like for the flavors to speak for themselves. I like for you to be able to have your food taste like your food, not your college brownie that was laden with, like, you just threw weed in it, you know, without even decarbing it. So I like for flavors to speak for themselves. So I really actually build the recipe all the way up until I get to a point where I can insert the cannabis, because clearly like heat has to be involved unless I'm using a nano powder, which is great because now there's a lot of products that are more water soluble, which is important because like now you can do everything, like as opposed to just like, I got to mix it and heat it up and put it in something and bake it. You know what I mean? But yeah, using those things and then pairing them with fats and things that really bring forth the cannabis and really kind of accelerates it through your endocannabinoid system, things like duck fat or truffle oil, or even like adding things into like a dairy, like creme fraiche or mascarpone, things like that. It gives it more of a smoother edge and a softer landing with whatever you're pairing with. Coconut milk, like I said, was one of my favorite things to add to it, because I can make a tom yum or a tom kha soup. Whew. It's just, I don't know. That's my version of soul food in 2024. Forever, actually, is leaning into that space of creating luscious, very savory, palatable, very agreeable things that include cannabis. Because after the fact, you're like, oh, wait, and I'm about to get high? That shit was really good.
Yes.
So, looking forward to getting elevated kind of in post, because you really had a great meal.
It definitely does. And an infused coconut milk tom yum sounds like it would fix me. I don't even know what it's fixing. It'll just fix it all, I think.
Fam, let me tell you, I don't know. I spend a lot of time especially when it's cold outside. That's a great thing. Often when it's cold, I'll go to Thailand and be in warmth and then come back and then build more flavors. But yeah, I love tom yum anything, to be honest with you. It's really one of my favorites.
I'm going to go take a smoke break, but we'll be back with more Jazz Cabbage.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. Wisconsin, the state of cheese, makes half of the nation's specialty cheese and wins more awards than any other state or country. Our heritage and traditions, master cheesemaker program, and the American propensity for innovation all put Wisconsin on the cutting wedge of cheesemaking. With over 600 varieties of cheese to choose from and 5,500 national and international awards and counting, get ready to turn your refrigerator into a trophy case. Enjoying a Wisconsin cheese is basically like winning a gold medal in culinary achievement. Set your mind at cheese. When you bite into a wedge of Wisconsin Wonderful, you know it is made with the ultimate skill and passion possible. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back, my little cabbages, to more Jazz Cabbage. Oh, that sounds truly transcendent. And part of why I've been just so excited to have you on the show and to have this conversation is because the level at which you're not only bringing this incredibly elevated cuisine, but you're thinking 360, you're thinking about the effect, how the different ingredients are all going to play together, and also how that's going to impact people's experience of the cannabis and experience of the food in one and the same. And also how that impacts how you keep the guests safe. Like you said, being precise about dosage, because yeah, with butters, it can be really tricky unless they've been completely lab tested to get that precise dosage, which is okay when you're cooking for the homies and everyone's just kind of vibing. But when you have guests coming to an event, coming to an experience, and guests who you don't know personally, you do really have to be on your P's and Q's in that way. But one of the many, many things that I really admire about you is that not only are you this incredibly talented, badass chef who works with superstars and corporate clients, and you're so vocal about the quality and the caliber of your work, but none of what you do is rooted in ego, which is incredibly refreshing when you think of the larger culinary landscape and just how much of that toxic ego we do see in the culinary world. And in my mind, you'd have every right to put yourself on a pedestal, but you're so approachable, you're so grounded, and you're always taking time to educate others, even through coming onto shows like this. And I've read that at your events, you'll often work out of an open kitchen so that people can see what you're doing and ask questions and really learn alongside. So I'm curious as to what it is that keeps you so grounded in your work and why you feel that it's so important to use your platform to educate others about cannabis.
Thank you for saying those things. I really Man, ego's a motherfucker. I'm gonna tell you that right now. It is a motherfucker. And I've watched people move from there and move from like, this is a great idea to get into it for money. But I never saw it that way. I never saw what I was doing, something that I was like gonna fall into a lot of money. It was literally a conversation that I've had with my ancestors over and over and over again. My grandfather, him and I are born on the same day. We're both Scorpios. So it's a lot going on there. And my dad is also a Scorpio, 4 days after us. But the one thing that my grandfather used to do is he used to make salves and tinctures and all types of foraging for herbs and things that he would grow. And he was healing people. My grandfather's nickname was Doc, but he was never a doctor. And so I took a lot of energy from him in the understanding of being a conduit for people's healing and being a conduit for a better understanding and better access to a world that is seemingly unknown, but there's so much room for us to learn and grow and absorb. And so I look at it more as I'm in alignment with my overall purpose. And I never feel that I am a person that people are like, you're a healer. And I'm like, nah, chill. I'm not. Like, I am in a sense, like, food, wellness, I get it. But I don't like to use those terms in terms of me. I more or less like to use the word conduit. Like, I'm making sure you have access. And here's the door to go this way, or you can go this way, or you can choose this way. But all of the things that you choose should be from the earth, should be a single source origin plant that is not synthesized and made into something else. And your food should exist as your food in its natural state, not processed, not laden with chemicals and things like that. So that's the place that I come from. I come from literally and generally a place out of love. I mean, of course, I have to be business savvy and learn how to navigate the world in this matrix that we live in. You have to know those things. But I really feel like my grandmother on my shoulders when I stir pots. And I also feel like my grandfather when I'm adding plant medicine into food. So it feels right. Like, almost all the time. And it feels like love. And it feels like sometimes the experiences also make me cry because people, when they're eating, they're unloading heaviness, right? And I feel that heaviness, and that heaviness runs through me. I have to like kind of bypass that energy. But when people tell me their stories during dinners and during events, and whether they're have cancer or wherever they came from, they always have a story. And so that story rubs off on me. So at least sometimes I can turn around and be like, you know what? Hey, I think I did a good job here. Everybody's good. Everybody's well. Everyone had a great time. I could leave with knowing that I did what was in alignment with my purpose. And that keeps me humble. And it keeps me at a level of humility where I'm not doing too much. I'm also high, so I'm never going to do too much anyway. But at the same time, it keeps me in a pocket of being in gratitude. That's all.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm someone who, and I keep saying this on this show, but it's my truth and I'm going to keep saying it. I have really been identifying these days as a culinary spiritualist, because there is that inherent spirit to food. And especially, I mean, I can't speak to any other culture's experience, but especially as a Black person in this country, our food is so much of how we've been able to hold on to our lineages and to our history and to our people, because we weren't able to do so many other things. It was not only illegal for people to learn how to read, but, there were children being blinded because they dared to learn how to read. And the one thing we could continue to do, one of the few things we were allowed to do, is to cook. And so many of our recipes, even if you're not making traditional, Black American food, traditional soul food, there is still, like you said, when you're standing over the pot, stirring it, you feel those ancestors, with you, and you feel them guiding you. You hear them saying, okay, add a little pinch of this, not too much. You hear that in the back of your head, when you're gonna go a little overboard. But that creative drive is really so ancestral. And so to hear you speak to how that roots you in your work and how cannabis adds this incredible layer to that as well is really just so incredible. And thank you for sharing that, because it's something that resonates with me so, so, so deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the stories, the food that we make is a story. The food that we came from is a story. Sometimes I don't even know the recipe straight up. I'm just going off of what I remember it tasted like. And I'm going off of what I saw my grandmother do, or my mother do, or my auntie, or somebody like that. So it is a spiritual experience. It is something that brings me an immense amount of joy. It brings me also frustration when I can't get it right. But at the end of the day, it feels like the closest that I have had experience God or spirit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's it's different. I can see the glow at the end of the dish. It's like, oh, I did a dinner for Morgan Freeman and Dave Chappelle, at the end of,
wow.
It's been about 7 months ago I did this dinner. And Morgan Freeman walks into the kitchen and he gives me and my team a standing ovation. And he made everybody else get up and clap for us. And I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Because Morgan Freeman, I didn't know anything about how he would want to eat. I just knew he was an older Black man and that he was from the South. And so my chefs that are mostly women and trans, we conspired to one of the greatest menus that we had put forth. There was a moment that we all sat there and were like, look, what would your grandmother make? Your grandmother make? What would they like? We just started talking in our menu building session. And mind you, we didn't know that Morgan Freeman was coming until about 18 hours before he got there. So it's not like I had an immense amount of time to prepare a menu. Essentially, this is what Chappelle does. He just says somebody's on their way. So I'm like, oh, okay. And so after he came in the kitchen, gave us a standing ovation, then he says, that was one of the best meals I've ever had in my life.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
like, no way. Mind you, this is not infused with cannabis. So I did get Morgan Freeman high right before that. We did smoke. But he said, best meal in his life. I'm like, what? You've been all around the world. You're Morgan Freeman. You're the voice of God. You
right.
There's no way this is going to be one of the best meals in your life. And then Morgan Freeman's 80 something years old.
Right.
And he looks back at Dave and he said, this is it right here. This is a story. The way that Chef Nikki moved through this kitchen and put that food out is some of the best food I've ever had in my life. And I was like, again, something that I went into the bathroom and I had to shed a couple tears because I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
Well, at that moment, we all felt the stories of our grandparents and the stories of our mothers and our aunties and our great-greats. And we felt that energy move through our hands. And so that's what I'm saying to you, that there are times where I don't even know how it's happening. I don't even know how I'm building it and creating flavors because it's just coming to me in the nick of time. And my turnaround time has to be so tight and so precise and so quick. So it's almost like I'm just getting carried into the pot. You know what I mean? It's really hard for me to explain, but I think you get it because we were talking about a culinary spiritualist. It is It's literally something that my hands move through some other way sometimes.
It's that ineffable energy. I completely agree. And one of my favorite books that I've had the chance of reading this year is Crystal Wilkinson's Praise Songs for the Kitchen Ghosts. And it really speaks to that concept of just having your ancestors, having your elders on your back as you're moving through just being in the kitchen. And like you said, not even necessarily knowing the recipe, but knowing what it's supposed to smell like, what it's supposed to taste like. At what point is it bubbling over that you turn the temperature down? And thank you so much for sharing that story, because that, personally, if I got that kind of feedback from Morgan Freeman, you wouldn't be able to tell me a damn thing for the rest of my life. So
yeah, it's a thing. Like, I held on to it like it was the sweetest little nugget I had. And also because, like, not that I can't tell these stories, but I don't immediately go on the internet and be like, oh my God, Morgan Freeman. Mm-hmm. But I screamed it to the rooftops for sure. and I just cataloged it as a great moment in my culinary career.
I cannot wait to see and just hear about all of the great moments that are to come. Chef Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for just sharing yourself in this way and being so rooted and so open to being able to share these incredible experiences with people. And I cannot wait to pull up and get me my plate one of these days.
Hey, I'm coming to your house.
So right as we wrap up, can I just ask you where our listeners can find and keep up with your work?
I'm at The Chef Nikki on most social platforms, and I also am thechefnikki.com is my website. My event company is called The High End Affair. That's my culinary cannabis tour, and we're doing some cool things this year. So look out for the High End Affair coming to definitely New York. We'll always have something in Detroit. We're working on moving into some other states and countries in 25.
Ooh, international. Thank you again so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
So welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out our show notes to learn more about our guests and other cannabis resources. Jazz Cabbage is produced by Taylor Early, H. Conley, and me, Chala June. Sound design and mixing is by Sam Gerardi. Jazz Cabbage is powered by Simplecast. Jazz Cabbage, hosted by Chala June, is a production of Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe. For more Jazz Cabbage shenanigans, find us on Instagram at JazzCabbagePod. If you want to drop me a note, you can write to the pod at jazzcabbagepodcast@gmail.com.